Hey guys, it's Blevins here with heroesofartifact.com. I wanted to just do a little intro here after the fact, just kind of preview what I'm doing here. Starting a little interview series with some card game pros from Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, and other places. Basically anyone who's willing to talk to me about Artifact. This one is a little rambly at times because G and I have such a rapport. We've known each other for years, so we kind of go off on tangents. So excuse me for that, but I think the content is very useful and very relevant as he is a semi-pro Hearthstone player and has been a semi-pro Magic player for quite some time. He's got a lot of really great insights. It's just that you can tell right at the beginning that we have a rapport of people who've known each other for years. So bear that in mind. We do talk about a lot of stuff from Hearthstone to Magic the Gathering, but we also do delve into Artifact. It's a little bit later on, so stick with us and enjoy the interview. Hello, everyone. This is the Blevins, and I'm here bringing you today an interview with a good friend of mine. I don't know, maybe he can clarify this, but I would consider maybe a semi-pro or aspiring pro
Agreed.
player. Okay, semi-pro player. I knew him back from Magic the Gathering, but also most notably now from top aiding Dreamhack Montreal. That, of course, is none other than G. Welcome, man. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I just want to get a little bit on you and talk a little bit about Artifact. Obviously, that's the topic of discussion at a macro level here. That's what I'm focusing on a lot. Of course, you come from a little more diversified and a little bit, and we come from kind of the same background, but I would say you grinded more than I ever did. So it's going to be nice to get your perspective here. But I want to start with kind of your origin story. How did you get into gaming and competitive gaming?
Yeah, so gaming for me, basically kind of a lifelong thing. I still play Super Nintendo and like Nintendo to this day. I actually don't own any modern consoles really.
Mm-hmm.
So I mostly play those games and then like Hearthstone or whatever game, I'm really into.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to credit that era of games, particularly like some of the notable SNES standouts, Chrono Trigger in particular.
Mm-hmm.
The games were so good for me, even though I was very young.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of made me want to continue to play these things.
Mm-hmm.
I got into like Magic. I knew about it since the mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And like I want to say it was like the old Scry magazines and there was a few others.
Yes.
I can't even remember all of them, but I had those
Mm-hmm.
back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of my friends, their older brothers played, and they taught me how to play in the I think it was like the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically played up until 2017, like early 2017. I was officially done, but
yeah. So what obviously, a lot of us had that same sort of past where, you got introduced by an older brother. I mean, we're of an age where like I'm pretty sure we're about the same age. I'm 28, so we're in the same
29.
Yeah, we're in the same age bracket where we were too young to be playing when the game came out because we were like 3 or 4 years old. So it was usually I was actually playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and then some of the older guys there taught me Magic. But what kind of got you from maybe being like a kitchen table casual player into like the more competitive scene that I know you from?
For Magic, so the earliest competitive card game I ever played, I never dipped into Yu-Gi-Oh, but while I was like just getting started in Magic and learning that, playing with my friends, the Pokemon TCG came out shortly after that, and I don't know what I only played for about a year. I don't know what quantifies being good at that game was, but there was a Toys R Us right near my house that had the local. Every week it was like their version of FNM. I can't remember what it was called. It was like Pokemon League or something.
Yep, I remember those. Yep.
Yeah. So I had a very, very powerful advantage over the majority of players, be it kids my age at that time or even the older kids that were like adults, basically. I knew what meta decks were. And I was playing what was called back then Haymaker and the Rain Dance deck that ran Blastoise, and I actually had teched in Dragonair package to beat the Alakazam Mr. Mime, because Blastoise decks struggled against that, but they were bricked by Dragonair, which had a resistance to Psychic. So literally every week it was just like, it was extremely unusual for me to do anything but just go undefeated. And that was kind of cool because I hadn't really done F&Ms at that point. So it's like, damn. And then I didn't know that there was anything beyond that for Pokemon, even though I knew about tournament decks. I didn't know how to get into like the higher tournaments. So I got out of Pokemon, and then I started hearing about these F&Ms, started going to those at I don't know if you'll remember this place. There's a place called The Gathering in Tonawanda.
No, that was before my time in Buffalo.
Oh, man. The Gathering is, in my opinion, what a lot of people think the bad, like, LGSs of old, where it's like the worst sides of like the gaming community are, and it truly was, but it was awesome. I had all sorts of fun there with my friends. And then I started playing at Dave and Adams in the early 2000s, and it just went from there. I started playing in PTQs and, you know, some of the larger things slowly but surely. And GPs eventually.
Yeah. I had a similar sort of story as well, you know, just kind of getting up and getting intrigued by that. So don't want to spend too much time on Magic, but obviously now you're no longer in the Magic the Gathering scene, at least not as much as you were. But before you left, what were some of the better things that you liked about the Magic the Gathering competitive scene?
Yeah, so what I liked about the Magic competitive scene, a lot of that dissipated, and I'm trying to like even like wrap my head around what I truly liked about it. I enjoyed the people that I traveled with at the end there. I mean, that was a lot of fun. I never did it for the money, thank God, because if you're playing Magic for money, you know that's not a realistic thing.
There's like 7 people that can do it.
Yeah. To me, it wasn't, and I also don't have the whole, I'm playing for respect. To me, it was, I play for the competition and the thrill of like winning, because that's a great feeling for anyone who is like in any type of competitive thing, be it chess or whatever. I enjoyed that feeling. I liked older Magic tournaments a lot better. The venues I tended to like better. You had before it got really big, it was nice playing in PTQs and Grand Prix in in hotels where they had rugs. It was way more comfortable.
Yep.
So that was great. And there was the community, it felt a lot tighter. Like you knew, even if like, you know, the coverage was really bad, you kind of knew who the really good players at a PTQ would be, because people would travel really far. Like it's like you go to a PTQ in Pittsburgh, you know, 10 or so years ago, and it's like, oh, Adam Yurchik is here, or like, you know, people from like out of state, and you're like, oh shit, like, and you knew who these people were. And now that kind of feels lost. We know who the really good pros are due to like coverage internet now, but a lot of the like your PTQ final bosses and your grinders who are aspiring to hit that level, a lot of that seems kind of gone now, except maybe on the SCG circuit. You still have a good idea of those grinders, but not the main circuit anymore.
You know what I think that is attributed to? The them no longer keeping track of DCI number or DCI rank.
That was definitely something, even though I have so many DCI numbers. Yeah, that was actually one thing I did. I was known to troll PTQs by getting new DCI numbers, and Wizards had a really great record of not compiling my DCI numbers. So there was a number of PTQs I top 8'd where literally I had a fresh DCI rating that day. And I remember there was one guy named like Phil Diorsi who had like, he was almost 2K. Like he had just gotten second the week before in a PTQ. He lost to me in the first round. He's like, what was your rating? I'm like, I just got a new, I just got a new.
Just completely trashed this rating.
Like I was very known for doing that.
That's awesome. That's also the worst, but it's also awesome.
It enabled me.
Yeah, I just remember like going to events, and like before I would go to like events that were a little further away, I'd like look up like, oh, who are the top players in that area, and then I'd see them. I'm like, oh, that's Kai Burnett or that's Eric English. Like they're the top people in this area. It's like, oh man, I know this person's good. And like it's a little bit of that like almost pre-internet area, even though I was looking up the numbers on the internet, but like pre-Twitch area.
It was before it was really widespread.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the competition and traveling and that was great. What kind of specifically didn't you like about Magic the Gathering Cup? Like what led you to kind of leave the scene?
So there was a lot of factors, because Magic had been, you know, such a it was, I don't know if I'd say important, but it was, I need a competitive outlet or I'll get very bored, and that's very bad for me. So Magic was one of the main competitive outlets in my life for so long. I don't like the Magic community. I don't like the decisions Wizards has been making for the past several years, especially concerning their competitive scene. It is not very good. And the decisions they've made after I've left from people that I know who grind it they continue to be baffling. And I wasn't having fun. There was a running joke where I often said, the last time I had fun playing Standard for more than a year in Magic was back in Lorwyn block. It was a true statement too. Like there was like parts of Dragons and Tarkir were fun, and other aspects of Standard, but honestly, I just wasn't having fun, and you had to play Standard.
Yeah, it was absolutely the most pivotal role to getting qualified. Now you could grind, legacy side events at GPs, but that's not getting you on the Pro Tour. But,
no, you had to play.
Yeah, so kind of transitioning out of Magic, you of course are now a Hearthstone player and have ascended quite high, I would say, in the Hearthstone ranks. I know obviously you just got the top 8 at Dreamhack Montreal, but you've also had a number of other respectable finishes as well. What kind of led from that transition to from MTG to Hearthstone?
Yeah, so I actually remember this pretty vividly because it was not a decision I took lightly. I knew in Magic that I had 2 more Grand Prix that I went to, and one was GP New Jersey, which I cashed. I had an awful experience at GP New Jersey with just interactions with the player base that I honestly thought I was going to get DQ'd because me and a player had some very, very choice words about each other, and I was not happy because I played that guy 2 weeks before in Pro Tour Ireland, and him and I got along great. He lost to me there and was tilted. He lost to me in New Jersey, and then all of a sudden he has some very choice words with me, and I was not taking that lightly at all, because one of the things he said, which is, if you play card games, this is basically the second worst thing you can call someone besides a cheater. He said that I slow rolled him, and and people who watched the match said that I did not slow roll him, and they thought that he was completely outlined. He was, and I did not take that very well.
Yeah, that is one of the worst things. I've had that happen to me where people were legitimately slow rolling me. That is just
same.
The actual worst.
I got slow rolled by. I don't want to give out names, but like,
we don't need to start matches, the Goss train.
Yeah, those feature matches in like Star City Columbus. And like 2 times I was in Columbus that I was doing well. Like the people who travel with me, they were watching just a train wreck unfold on the guy who I was playing against. And I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like this guy, and like the judges were like really getting mad at him. And I had to pull a judge away from the table. And I'm like, why aren't you guys doing anything about this? And they just didn't. And that was annoying me. And after the Jersey thing, I was like, you know what? I think I got to be done with this game. I can't handle these people. And I played a team event in Dallas, I think it was, and I was San Antonio with another Buffalo player, Ryan Hare, and our other teammate. And after that, I just wanted to be done. I had other bad interactions with one of Buffalo's most hated pros. Yet again, you probably know who he is, the Swine Man himself. He got soundly beaten in an affinity mirror, and boy, was he pissed at me. Even though he threw, but and after
Classic.
having exactly. It was like I got him back for Kai, but you definitely know who that guy is.
Sure do.
And that, just like, I was running into more and more players like that, and I was really fed up with it because it just wasn't fun, and I didn't like the fact that people were just assholes for no reason to me, and I walked away from it. A few people that I knew, a local Hearthstone player like Jordan and everything, they kept telling me for like months, like, yeah, you should play Hearthstone. Like, you'd probably be pretty good at it. And I looked at it for a while, and I wasn't sure. I looked at Hearthstone for a couple months, actually. And it was sometime in the middle of Ungoro that I actually got into it. And I enjoyed it. It was nice, and I played my first major in Hearthstone like within 2 months of starting. and the players there were so much better than me. And I hit Legend of Hearthstone the first week I played, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And then I realized how deep it goes and how tough the players actually really get at the high levels. And I didn't realize that they were actually that good, because coming from a Magic background and from an outsider perspective on Hearthstone, there is a negative connotation on Hearthstone that it's a lot more variance. And after being in the more and more serious I get into Hearthstone, I realize that it's actually a very, very skill intensive game, much more than people think it is. And there's a reason why you see the same people doing well in it. It's because they're that good.
Yeah. The first time I ever played in a Hearthstone event, it wasn't even like a top tier event, but I just like got completely bodied. And I'm like, look, I think I talked about the match with some people afterwards, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this guy like did this." I'm like, "Yeah, he had this really weird turn, and I thought I was ahead." And then it turned out that he just like knew that I was going to have patron on turn, like patron, axe on turn 9. It just completely hosed me when I did it. I'm like, "Wow, that is just so next level." I'm like so many steps behind this, and yeah, you don't really get that, and you don't get that on the ladder either. Because
no, definitely not.
I had the same thing where like hitting legend is merely playing relatively competently enough times. It's not it has nothing to do with being super super great. It's just like, oh, I played a ton of games and I had a 55% win rate. I got to legend. Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I had a similar transition as well. It's just like, at the end of the day, like, I don't need to be around these people. Like, you really don't. It's not offering anything extra. In fact, it's actually offering a lot less, and we'll get into kind of that a little bit more. But I want to have you talk a little bit about just the overall experience of DreamHack Montreal, because unfortunately, you were doing so well, but they didn't have you on camera.
Yes. So on that, I'm not a streamer or anything. I actually didn't care if I was on camera or not. I cared more because people
but
wanted
we
to.
did.
Yeah, exactly. And I guarantee you, if they actually did give me an interview, there was gonna be some references to the Buffalo Magic community. I already had that planned out, but there was definitely gonna be shout outs to a particular individual.
Yes.
I had not forgotten to do that, but they didn't do that, unfortunately. Yeah, so a lot of people there who I didn't know, and I went back and watched. I watch a lot of Hearthstone vids of like high level players, so I actually did go back and watch the Twitch stream and everything. And there was people actually in the stream that were like, "Wow, he just got shafted out of any camera time." I was like, "Wait, what?" Because that would never happen in Magic in my experience.
Right.
So that was very surprising. It was actually kind of like nice that I was like, "Oh wait, these other people are like, hey, you got shafted." So it was a little annoying because I started off, I was undefeated, like even early on into day 2. And the people I was beating were getting on camera the round after they would lose to me. And like both tables next to me would be gone. And I'm like, and I wasn't playing bums. I was playing really, really good players. Like my last 3 matches, all 3 of them had been at World Championships. I was like, there's a reason my breakers were the best of the my win rate. And I was a little surprised because there was 3 rounds in particular that they actually told me, they're like, "Oh, we're probably going to have you as a standby match," and then they would change their mind and be like, "No, we're actually going to take this match." I'm like, "Okay, that's whatever." I had the top 16, and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to die out in the top 16, but that this is still a really good one." And because I knew we weren't going to, by the time the top 16 started, it was about midnight or so. We played that out, and I was like, "Oh, I top 8 it. I guess I'm going to be on camera." All right, so I had to figure out for that, and then they got through the first match. I was the 3rd match of the day. Right around when the second match was starting, the TO came up to me, and he's like, "Hey, they want you to play your match off stream right now." And I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "Oh, well, it's the delays." And I was like, we're the only aggro match in the entire top 8. Like our match is going to be over in 30 minutes, regardless of how many games we play. Like it's not going to be a 2-hour control slog fest like all these other top 8 matches. And my opponent also made a very similar argument of just like, why?
Yeah.
But I knew that it wasn't the TO. It was the like broadcasters and Twitch and whatnot. So you have to pick your battles. I've argued
Mhm.
with TOs in Hearthstone and other games and won, but this is one that I knew that I wasn't going to win because it
Mhm.
wasn't up to the TO. So I just accepted that. Yeah, had to play that out, and it was I lost. I put up a valiant fight, but I mean I was really happy with top 8. It was a great experience. Besides, the round length was bad. That has a lot to do with our meta right now, which is a
Mhm.
very control heavy meta in
Mhm.
Hearthstone, especially in tournaments at that level. Every round there was a match that took 2 hours or more every single round.
Mhm.
So I get it. It was a lot of fun. I actually didn't get to. I like Montreal as a city. I did not get to experience a lot of it
Mhm.
because every day I was there. I mean, I played Hearthstone
Mhm.
for like 12 plus hours, like every day almost. I
Mhm.
mean, I played 10 hours on Friday and I played 13 hours on Saturday.
Mhm.
So it was great. I was getting pretty nervous because my day 2 matches were so tense.
Yeah.
Especially my round 8 with Muzzy. Probably the most tense tournament match I've ever had. Really, really close back and forth.
Mhm.
Just barely edged him out in game 5 with some very timely zoo draws.
Mm.
And because I saw I drew him in bracket, I knew what his lineup was. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm dead. I made a good run,
Mhm.
and yeah, it was very surreal seeing that. I was like, oh, my breakers are so good. I probably can just lose my round 9 and get in anyway.
Mhm.
It was a good feeling. The people with me were pretty stoked, mostly because Buffalo doesn't really have, just Western New York in general doesn't really have a competitive Hearthstone scene at all.
No, not
We
really.
had we had one player years ago, a guy named Dear Jason.
Yes.
I
Yep.
think he moved out of the area,
He
but
was
or
also
he's like
really
busy at
young.
school.
He's
Yeah,
he
Dear Jason
was
was a young guy.
he's actually coincidentally enough the person who completely rocked me in the one tournament I played in Buffalo in Hearthstone
Yeah,
was him. Yeah, but he was I think at the time he was like 15 or something. And I
yeah,
just got
he
completely
was
hosed.
he's really young. He's only like 19 or 20. And there's a guy named Tim who's pretty young too, who won a tournament series that they no longer do, which was
Mm.
like Fireside Gathering Championship. Like,
Okay.
yeah, he won that, and I know he was a pretty good player, but I don't know if he plays a lot anymore. I've actually never met him, but I know he was a pretty good player. But yeah, for a while now, there's not really a lot of like Western New York players that go to like the majors or like you hear of doing well consistently on like standard or anything,
Hmm.
which actually is like kind of hurt me because there's aspects of Hearthstone that I want to improve in, and it's very tough to do that solo.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, and I'm not the best at networking with people over a game where you cannot type to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like I mean, I guess we can kind of get into that because one of the I have shifted much more into the online card game setting. I mean, even when I was playing MTG consistently, I was doing the bulk of my testing and whatnot on Magic Online and Magic Online tournaments. But there's much more of that sense of community and like we would have I don't know how many back in the day. I mean, I think like Theros block we were drafting like 3 times a week or something like that, like in real life, and then doing drafts online as well. There's really nothing like that in Hearthstone. Um,
No,
so I guess like what are some of the what are some of the things that you like about the competitive side of the Hearthstone scene?
I like the steps they're making. That to me is very, very important. That I see the company who runs them this in this situation, Blizzard,
Hmm.
they're making choices that generally make sense to me in terms of benefiting competitive play.
Hmm.
Like now, instead of every month is a grind, you can drop your worst result or you can take a month off if you're that good and you don't
Hmm.
need the month. That's nice because grinding ladder, it's a grind
Hmm.
and you're playing a lot, especially at the end. So that's nice. The more tour stops, I know some people are kind of like, there should be less because it's so much.
Hmm.
But coming from a background in MTG where I was traveling every week anyway, to me, I love it. I want
Hmm.
more of them,
Yeah.
so I'm happy with that. I know that's not universal. Uh, their coverage is generally quite good, especially for a card game. I think Magic coverage is kind of a joke.
Hmm.
It can be pretty decent in competent hands, but I think on average Hearthstone has much better coverage. so it's a much more watchable game too.
Mm-hmm.
uh, I get a lot of that community feeling in the competitive, like, higher echelons of Hearthstone, and
Okay.
it never has come off to me as elitist, which a lot of people speculated to me that it would be, and it really hasn't been. A lot of the players who I know that are better than me, that like see me at the majors frequently, they're actually really helpful. And I was not expecting that. Like, I don't get talked down to, which that
Which
happens a
happens
lot. Yeah,
all the time in Magic.
yeah, it's really annoying when like someone who like literally started playing 6 months ago attempts to explain to me a deck that I've been playing for over 10 years that I've queued for the Pro Tour for. I love when people in Magic do that to me.
Yeah.
I don't have that happen to me in Hearthstone. And they're genuinely pretty helpful. There's a couple Hearthstone players who are very tilty when they lose, but I don't know how this is different than Magic, but they actually tilt away from you, like away from the table. They'll leave after the match and tilt, and then they're fine. And that I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's definitely a different it's a different experience altogether, with Magic and Hearthstone. What are some of the things maybe that you don't like so much about the competitive Hearthstone scene, or that they could improve upon?
Yeah, so as much as I like Blizzard for the steps they're taking, I also actually hate Blizzard for some of the things that they do, which ironic, but anyone who knows Blizzard for any length of time knows that this is a very factual statement. Blizzard typically gets things right. They typically are slow on things, but they typically do it right, which I like and dislike. Some changes that need to be made to Hearthstone concerning nerfs, which is a great thing about non-paper games. Like, you can't nerf Gideon Ally of Zendikar,
right?
But you can nerf Corridor Creeper.
Yep.
And that's great. Unfortunately, some of these nerfs, I will admit, they have gotten a bit better about it than the past cycle, but as of the previous year, they were really slow. Call to Arms and Corridor Creeper, far too long did those go unnerfed. And also the Control Warlocks of Q-Block. That deck reigned for far too long, and it was really ridiculous. Most egregiously, I think, Patches.
Yep.
And then my least favorite card in Hearthstone is Caverns Below.
Okay. Yeah.
The Rogue Quest.
Rogue.
I have flat out said numerous times before it even got its second nerf that the card should just be put into Hall of Fame or gotten out of Standard, because it was. I saw that this was a card that would be a problem no matter what, and then it got nerfed again, and I still said that card was going to be a problem. It got a lot of defensive tools that like the Scale Hide and Giggling Inventor in the next two sets.
Giggling Inventor.
And all of a sudden, Quest Rogue's the fucking best deck in a tournament that goes into any lineup. And it's like, and it's just in ladder, it's different.
Right.
On ladder, aggro decks typically you beat up on most Quest Rogue players. In a tournament where you're playing against professional level Hearthstone players who really know what they're doing with Quest Rogue, most aggro decks are not favored anymore. Like Odd Paladin, you're actually unfavored. If they're double Phantom Knives, you're actually unfavored. Basically, it's just Zoo and Mage. Like, Token Druid's not favored against those, I don't think, for the most part. It's kind of close, but it's ridiculous to me that a deck that is a control killer has good aggro matchups in good players' hands. Like, it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
I also wondering where the tournament mode that we were supposed to start beta testing in the summer. It's almost fall, but
I was gonna when you if you didn't bring it up about things you don't like about Hearthstone competitive, I was certainly going to be asking about the tournament mode that back in the day when I had a Hearthstone podcast back in like the early days, like in 2015 probably, we were like, actually it was right when we were doing the podcast, like before Blackrock Mountain came out. I remember it was like just in the first, actually we had already been established when Blackrock Mountain was coming out, because I was playing in a tournament series where every week the tournament would literally be different because another wing of Blackrock Mountain was coming out, so I could change my decks. It was a very interesting experience, and that tournament was run horribly, but that's
great.
Yeah. The TLDR is that it was an NVIDIA series, that I was literally they had NA rankings and then they had world rankings. I was number 1 NA. I was XO for the entire Swiss, and I was like tied for first, but like number like 7 world in that tournament. And there was like 10,000 people in that tournament. And instead of doing what they said they were, which was they're going to cut to top 8 after the Swiss, they said, "Oh, we're going to cut to top 256 and play a single elimination tournament." Haha. So I got nothing for being rank 1 after 10 weeks of playing. So
Oh,
yeah, I'm not salty.
Fantastic.
I'm not salty.
Oh, I'd be mildly aggravated.
I heard stories about people who actually did place in the top 8. Like you were supposed to get like a free NVIDIA Shield or whatever. Like that was like when that Shield was coming out, and apparently they just never got paid. But I don't know how if that ever got resolved. Basically that was the beginning of the end of Hearthstone competitive for me. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, we were asking for tournament mode at the very minimum 3 years ago, probably closer to 4 years.
That was like what I gathered from like my reading of Hearthstone, is that is not a new concept. We were supposed to start beta testing this in the summer. It's almost fall, and I'm like, why don't we have this? At least they gave us that the match pause feature, because oh my god, was that the bane of tournaments, where you just have to regame whenever someone DCs, or they just lost. Like that was absurd.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, go ahead.
I also kind of think a visible MMR would be nice for Legend players, or just in general. I don't like hidden values that people with enough data you can figure it out, but hidden values for where your rank is and everything is kind of a drag. And also just the feast or famine of ladder is really brutal on the last day. That kind of like bums me out about Hearthstone, is where you can have a very high Legend rank or have a really good win rate in Legend for most of the month, and then just, the last day you got counter queued 5 times in a row. Sucks to be you. You effectively get nothing, basically.
Or that like, really you've got couldn't get the last day of the month off of work, or any other number of things.
Yeah, exactly.
Which just sucks.
It's a feel bad when it's like, all right, well, if you really want to make a legitimate push, if you're not camping like single digit ranks of Legend going into the last day, if you're like in like the top 2 to 500 and you actually want to push, I mean, enjoy playing the last 2 days of ladder for like over 12 hours a day. And it's a very small win loss streak away from just undoing everything, and it's an awful feeling.
Yeah, it's I guess lucky in that I haven't been in that position where I was ever close enough to even consider making a push. So, but let's shift gears here into. I mean, I started the show saying that we were going to talk about Artifact, and we've talked about nothing. But we've talked about everything but Artifact. So let's shift in, talk about Artifact. Of course, just wanted to give a little bit of background on where you're coming from, where I'm coming from as well. So for Artifact, I know we've talked a little bit about it, but I'm not 100% sure exactly how familiar you are with everything. So don't, if you don't know something, don't worry about it. But from what you do know about Artifact and the scene, as a competitive player coming from your background, what is exciting about Artifact for you?
So when I look at Artifact and what I'm interested in, it has to be the tournament series. Like, I'm looking into how these tournaments are going to be run. It's helmed by generally competent people in Valve and with Garfield there as well. These people know what they're doing. They typically produce good work. That's very good for me. Dota, never played it. That's kind of lost on me. But Artifact, unlike a lot of the other CCGs and TCGs that I've seen come and go, it looks like they're going to be catering to a more competitive player base on average than a lot of other games I played. I at least get that impression, in the sense that there's not like it's not a mobile game, I don't think, and it's not
coming out for mobile in 2019. But I think that's more of an afterthought than a.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't actually sure if it was going to have a mobile version or not, and also the fact that it's not a game where, like in Hearthstone, you can free to play your way into Hearthstone, and if you're good enough, you can do well in it. this is a game where you actually do have to like throw down some money to get competitive tournament decks, and that makes me feel like it's going to be more geared towards competitive side. That alone, and also the prize money for these initial tournament series next year is very legitimate. It's not like some games where it's like, you get like just going off of Yu-Gi-Oh, like, oh, you get a playmat or
a plasma TV, or
you get a pinball machine, or you get to, like, is this some games out there, like, this is lost on me, but I know it's cool to other people, like, oh, you get to design a card or something. Like, to me, that's like a pretty lame prize for like a major tournament. Like, it'd be like, oh, well, I'd rather have something else that's cool. Like, so, to me, that's interesting.
Gotcha. So you mentioned, obviously, we know Artifact is specifically not free to play. So in your opinion, you think that's gonna bode well for Artifact?
It's hard to say. It depends on who it's drawing. So I do not have any background in Dota, and I actually really don't know people that play Dota a lot. I never got into that. So I don't know how Dota players spend money. I assume that they spend a lot of money, knowing what very little I do about Dota. I could be completely wrong on that.
Yeah, they spend a lot of money on cosmetics, basically, is the only thing you can spend money on in Dota.
Perfect. That's actually really good news. Because I want basically people who are like legacy players in Modern, or like Commander players in Magic, who are very happy to spend a lot of money on foils and black border versions of cards. Those players are great for card games because they'll put down a lot of money to support the card game and pay other players who are selling stuff that, the money is actually really important to them because maybe they don't have a full-time job or they're in school or whatever the hell. And they're not paying for power, basically. Like, they're not innately better. They don't have an unfair advantage. They just have stuff that looks cool. That I like. I actually like pay models in card games in particular. It's no different than pretty much any hobby, really. There's a few hobbies where you don't really put a lot of money in, but most hobbies, like any real sport, there's an initial investment you make that's not just time, but like actually like gear, equipment, and like cards. So I'm very okay with that having, like, I know some people are like, oh, I gotta spend money on cards. Too bad. Like, like, so what? Like, that's life.
Yeah.
So they have to make money somehow.
I know. I've had this either question or comments about it pop up, like on my streams, and even just like comments on videos and stuff, is like, oh, well, I'm really upset that Artifact isn't free to play because, like, now I can't play. Like, what do you have anything to, like, I know I have a very strong opinion on why those people are just like boldly and objectively wrong, but do you have an opinion on like the people who like say that they can't play a game because it's not free to play, or like that it's, it's going to be pay to win?
Move on to a new hobby, or suck it up, work some more hours, and put some money in it if it's something that's really important to you. Because if it's really important to you, then the money you spend into it is worth it.
Yeah. I mean, I have that opinion as well. As like, if you think that that spending, like if you had to estimate how many hours of grinding it would take without spending actual money to get a competitive Hearthstone deck, what would you estimate that to be?
Oh man, it depends. If you got really lucky with like free pack openings, it could be pretty low, but just with like average variance,
and like not even
it'd be a lot.
Right, it'd be a lot for one ladder deck.
Yeah,
and if you wanted to play in a tournament,
legend with one ladder deck that you could hit legend with, I think you could do it in a month, but it would be, you'd have to be really good, and you'd have to be playing probably well north of 5 hours a day.
Yeah,
probably close to double digits. You'd have to be good too. In 2 months, you definitely could do it. Like I said, unless you got really lucky on Asia. I opened a Baku in like basically like one of the free packs, so I was able to get a good deck very cheaply. But yeah, it's the same in Hearthstone. And like, yeah, you want a tournament lineup in Hearthstone? Okay, you need 4 decks.
Yeah.
Like, good luck grinding that in a 4-month season before they shift. Have
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. So I just wanted to I just wanted to get someone who's actually, done well in Hearthstone and who has, I guess, more credibility than my, blathering head of why these people are just so very wrong about their opinions of free to play. It's almost certainly like psychological that people think that it's actually free because it's not.
It is. Yeah, people have a very awful concept of what time costs.
Yeah.
Specifically,
Yeah.
in my experience, when it comes to card games, people always talk about like, oh, time is money. They always seem to nail that in everything that isn't card games.
I know, they just forget that.
It's some reason that goes out the window in exactly card games, in my experience. I don't get it because typically people who play card games seriously, they're usually at least okay at math,
Right.
but not in that sense. It's like, oh, well, you could spend $50 in Hearthstone and probably get most of, if not a tier 1 deck.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could play, I don't know, like several hundred hours, maybe more, to grind out one deck. It's like, okay, what's your time worth? Because
apparently about $1.50.
Yeah, because by my understanding, the minimum wage gets you a like 1 day of working a shift at minimum wage. You have a tier 1 Hearthstone deck.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, I just had to get that out there because it's it's just a very annoying question to get asked over and over again.
It is a really dumb thing too, and like, even though it's like, oh, you're bringing up like the whole credibility thing, that's just fact. I don't know why the fact like someone like being good at tournaments would be more credible on that. It's just a fact. Like, the fact I don't know how people don't understand that concept, but I don't know. I expect too much out of people.
Well, the thing is like, if it was just that people don't understand that concept, I'd be perfectly fine with that, because if people like, I legitimately have empathy for people who just don't understand something and are looking to be educated on something. Like, if they're like, well, it's free to play, I don't get, like, how could this be better? It's like, well, actually, if you value your time, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I could either spend $100 playing, or I could spend $50. It's whatever I value more. Exactly. That person's great. It's the people who like dig their heels in and like, it's not free to play, I'm not gonna play because I don't want to spend money, and like nothing you can say or do.
Good. Not crowding up my ladder. Go to another game. Like, I don't want people like that anywhere near me in like a tournament scene, because like, okay, you clearly have no concept of like any of this, and like you're just being obstinate about it because you have to be right from what you perceive to be a moral standpoint. You're just wrong.
Right.
It's like a pride. It comes on like, maybe it's a pride thing where they just have to be right on this for no reason.
Yeah, that sentence right there might describe the competitive Magic the Gathering scene in Buffalo, New York, more than anything else I've ever heard in my entire life.
Which one?
It's a sense of pride and morality that you have to be right for absolutely no reason, and also you happen to be wrong.
Yeah, I learned that was something that I said years ago on an old game that you might have heard of. It's a reflex-based game called Gun.
Okay.
So in an argument in that game, that was a very toxic player base. If you had the highest KD, if you had a better KDR, you were the moral victor, even if you lost. And that is a very similar principle that I use to this day when it concerns that type of the whole pay-to-win thing.
Yeah.
And Buffalo Magic in general. Yeah, that is a very accurate statement. A lot of people are not comfortable with that really hitting home to. It's too close to home for people.
It's way too close to home, but we're getting off on the hot gossip train again. Let's jump back into Artifact. So, obviously we have our opinions on the free to play model, leaning towards it being good. The prize pools for the initial tournaments, at least what we've heard, seem good. What do you think? What are you worried? What kind of worries you about what you know about Artifact, or maybe what you don't know that could go wrong with Artifact?
It is a untested game, not in the sense that there's not a beta, but we have not seen it perform yet in a live wide release, and that is true for any game. Because even really good manufacturers, they get it wrong sometimes. Look at Diablo 3. Blizzard almost always knocks it out of the park. Diablo 3 fell on its face on its release. this could happen to Artifact 2. It is a very real possibility, or it has a lot of hype early on and it just peters off and it's like people lose interest for XYZ reason. So these are legitimate concerns for games that aren't out yet. I think it is a very different card game than a lot of people are going to be used to. People who come from other card games, people who come from Dota might actually be a little more at home with how it plays. But people who come from more traditional card games, Magic, Hearthstone, I think, looking from the outside, it's intimidating. I've watched a lot of Artifact. I don't have a great grasp on it, but I've watched a lot of actual games of it being played. It's not as complex as I thought it was going to be. It just has a lot of moving parts, and looking in from the outside, it's like, oh, 3 lanes. That's really intimidating to people who are used to playing one board. That is your card game, and they're like, oh, all these cards, they interact with all these boards. Like, oh, what do I do? Like, it's a shopping phase, so like heroes. Oh, I'm getting gold. Like, I'm farming creeps. Like, people, there's a lot of differences from other card games, and I think that may intimidate new players. But the people, if the game does end up getting its like heels dug in and find success, the people who got in early, they're going to be heavily rewarded, because I do think that they're going to have a significant advantage, that they actually get the learning process out of the way of that. It's a very differently played card game. But I do think that could hurt Artifact in terms of getting a wider audience, because people are going to be kind of lost until they actually play it, but they might not because they feel like it's too complex. I've heard that from other players already.
Yeah, I've heard kind of the full swath, except I guess I haven't heard anyone say that it's actually easier than it looks. I don't think I've heard anyone say that. But in that vein, has there been any either cards or maybe mechanics in the game, or maybe even just general concept about Artifact that are specifically in the game itself that are kind of worrying to you, either from a power level perspective or a complexity perspective or just a general gameplay perspective?
Sure. So I think I like randomness and variance is incredibly important in any card game. It's very important to have that, which is an unpopular opinion, but it's very true. I do think that there is going to be some really ugly feelings on how some of the placements go and how cards are facing after shopping phase and whatnot. I think there might be some like groans on that, because it looks like you can get hit by some pretty bad placements of just like creeps and whatnot, and just like facing positions, and that might lead to some like feel bad moments. But I don't know that yet. Again, the game is not even fully out. That could get fixed, but that is one thing that I was like, some people might not like that. And I think there is going to be some balance issues between the houses. I don't know how good late game is going to be. I tend to think aggro usually has an advantage in any undiscovered meta, and I think that'll apply to Artifact as well. But once the meta is discovered, I am slightly concerned that when I see some of the later game heroes and some of the later signature spells, they just are completely backbreaking. And a lot of them, it doesn't feel like you can even play around. Like some of them feel like very, you just play this card. Because why wouldn't you play this card? Like the odds of something you could do being better than that are kind of low. And the fact that it's like unique to certain heroes and whatnot, that could be dangerous, but I can't say that for sure yet because the game is not out, and they could fix some of those issues where we don't just have, all right, the whole goal is to basically turtle up, make it to like your 7 mana turns or like 8 mana turns, and just clean house. And, it feels like your opponent basically had to get really favorable placements to win the game. That's one thing I kind of am like a little weary about, but I have to wait until, I've played the game and it's like, all ready to be released, because again, these things could get fixed.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I've noticed, like, that just seem like, because going from Magic to Hearthstone, I'm sure you felt a similar sort of transition is like there's a kind of like, even though it's not exactly, there's pretty much a 1-to-1 like comparison to be made for Magic and Hearthstone. It's like, well, Enter the Battlefield and Battlecry do
Yep.
the same exact thing, and Death Touch and Poisonous or whatever
Yeah.
do the same thing. For the most part, I mean, combat is different, but like I'd say, I don't know, 75 or 80% of Magic and Hearthstone, there's some sort of direct correlation between.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover for
Yeah,
sure.
but for Artifact, already, and we've only seen, I think, probably under 30% of the total cards, at least as the public has seen.
Yeah.
There's already concepts like the concept of gold and the shop phase and the 3 lanes and the heroes being having to be in certain lanes and respawning, and you can only cast spells of the colors if the heroes are there. Those really don't have any sort of correlation to, like, there's really not a, I mean, the closest thing to like needing to have the heroes in the lane to cast a spell is like the legendary sorceries or whatever that were in Dominaria, where like you have to have a legendary creature out to cast the spell. And that's like a brand new thing that they did as like a one-of cycle. So it's like not even, it's like barely even relatable at all. So
Yeah, kind of reminded me a little bit of a game for PlayStation 1 called Chrono Cross, where it had a field color and you could only cast certain spells when it was a certain color. Reminds me a little bit, like, it's almost reminds me, there's like some RPG aspects to Artifact, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, well, what I was getting at is, do you think that from your perspective, is it going to be? Do you think Artifact is going to be a harder game to get into, even from the like professional card player perspective? And then the follow up to that being like, if it is that hard, do you think that that's going to hurt the 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 competitive scene, because pro players in Hearthstone or even Magic the Gathering might not want to make that jump initially because it's so different?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern I have. It was like what I said earlier. From a outside looking in, it's an intimidating game to get into, even if you have a card game background, because it is so different. So that's a legitimate thing that could be a real problem for the professional aspect or people wanting to come over. If the game ends up coming out and it's still very enjoyable, and even though if it has a tough learning curve, if the game is fun to play and it's not imbalanced and it's it's reasonably balanced, and the high end, like the competitive scene, is enjoyable, people will come to the game if the tournament scene is supported, which it looks like it will be.
Gotcha. In that vein, what do you think Artifact can really do to succeed as, either, I guess, at the macro level, like an esport, which would be, I guess, more on the spectator side, or just the competitive scene from the tournament side?
Well, it's what works for me, I think, is different than what some people are going to want. I enjoy tournament grinding more than I do ladder grinding. So I'm quite okay with there being like Artifact Grand Prix or like PTQ sort of things in Artifact. I'm really okay with stuff like that. Whereas other people are going to bemoan the fact that like, I got to play in these. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, you want to compete, don't you?
Yeah.
What else are you going to do? You're just going to look at your collection, get in some games. So I'm okay with stuff like that. I think their route of going with high dollar cosmetics is a fantastic idea, and they honestly should. I'm almost willing to say they should just double down on that. Regardless of what the naysayers want to believe, I think they should just go real deep into that, like how Counter-Strike has. So that, I think, is a really good recipe for success outside of their competitive and just like the game health in general, in terms of like the game economy. But I'd be pretty okay with having like tournament series, like the Grand Prix. Like, I don't know how their qualification system is going to look for like their like their main events and their world championships. I would be pretty okay if there was multiple routes. Like if you can get there through their ladder system, or you can grind on via tournaments. The more ways you can get to high tournaments like Pro Tours and whatnot, the better. I'm willing to say that that's my experience. I enjoy even multiple formats. Like maybe they can mix it up. I don't know what their capabilities are going to be with formats yet, but Magic used to have PTQ seasons. Oh, they still do, but it's
Hmm.
3 standard, 1 modern. So enjoy. Maybe Artifact can have maybe one type of their tournament series is always like their equivalent of standard,
Hmm.
but maybe some of their other like secondary tournaments, their other stuff gives people more reason to play. If cards rotate out and whatnot, it gives those cards more value and longevity. People
Hmm.
like playing with their old cards. So
Hmm.
I think all those are good ideas, but I've never run a game of that size,
Hmm.
so I don't know the logistics of actually doing that. But I know
Hmm.
for me personally, I would enjoy that.
Yeah, and what's also kind of cool is that Artifact is going to have, draft and sealed as well, in hopefully a more mature format than Hearthstone Arena, which in my opinion is
Yeah,
just god awful.
yeah. I'm not an arena player in Hearthstone. I'm not a fan. I know some people that's their jam. Not me. I don't like how it's done.
Yeah, I think it's actually it's really good at helping people maybe learn the game and the like
Yep.
mechanics of the game, but in terms of fun or competition, it's actually useless.
Yeah, it's awful, and also statistically, it's way too turn dependent.
Yeah.
The coin is virtually not a factor on any major level in standard games of Hearthstone. Some
Hmm.
decks actually prefer to go second, but
Hmm.
the advantage of going first in Hearthstone very very minor. Sometimes it's a disadvantage. In Arena, huge advantage to go
Hmm.
first.
Yep.
Like more like up to double digit percentages it
Wow.
matters, and that is absurd. I've heard as high as 10%. I think it's probably single digits, but more than 5%. I believe it to be somewhere in between that. That is way too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's tough when the game there's no synergy of the cards generally. It's
No.
just like, oh, curve out, have tempo, lather, rinse, repeat. Like
Yeah, pretty
you went
much.
first,
Like,
you've got tempo, and that's inherently good because your creatures on the board are removal spells.
yep, yeah, that's one of the drawbacks of a form like that. And or you just throw out your creatures, and hey, you drew a board wipe that you drafted. Well, your
Yep.
opponent's gonna have a wonderfully hard time to win if they don't have a board wipe. So
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, cool. I just want to, before we wrap it up, I just want to talk a little bit about your, thoughts and I guess aspirations for the future. Um, in an ideal world where the tournament scene worked perfectly, the compensation worked perfectly for you, what game would you want to play professionally full time
uh,
if you had to
does it have
choose?
does it have to be one that I've played, or can it be any?
It can be whatever you want it to be.
If it's one that I've not played on a serious level, I have to go with chess.
Okay.
I like the cerebral states of high level chess players. Very intriguing of a game is chess to me.
Interesting.
Um, a game that I've played, it's really tough. I actually don't know. It would maybe be like any card game. Insert any card game. Probably
Hmm.
I don't think Magic, just because I don't like the community, not necessarily the card game, but
Hmm.
like Hearthstone, maybe Artifact does it for me. I mean, maybe I end up really liking Artifact and step away from Hearthstone to play it full
Hmm.
time. But chess would be my go-to for something like that.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I wasn't expecting the chess answer. That's interesting.
Why?
I don't know. Chess is always like it's chess to me. Like I have the utmost respect for chess players because it literally is just the ultimate like cerebral like challenge, and it's like a
Yep.
very pure like, oh, you're better than me. You're gonna win like
Yeah.
close to a hundred
Yeah.
percent of the time, which is it is exactly the extreme end of variance, right? It is zero
Yep.
variance.
Yeah.
Um, and like in theory, I want to believe that that's great, but in practice, it's just not fun a lot of the time because it's
Nope.
very hard to find someone who is uh, at a similar level where you're not just at like 75+% win rate, and that's just never fun for generally for either
Yeah.
player if you're winning so much. Um, and also like if it's not time chess, like those matches go on for like
Yeah.
10 hours, which is it's not fun.
Yeah,
But
it's brutal.
yeah, it's I think chess more like an abstract concept than a game sometimes, just because I don't watch it, and it's like,
That's how I
oh
think of it.
yeah, it's like not even a game. It's just like, oh, that's the extreme of no randomness that doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
to me, chess was always like you're searching for an answer, you're searching for truth in a game.
Hmm.
So, like to me, there it's like a very strange thing that we call a game that is chess, and it's
Hmm.
ridiculously complex at the highest level. I love watching competitive chess.
Yeah, I think if I got more into it, I could really appreciate it. But it's like the thing about it that really gets it for me is like when I saw a video of a tournament where there are two players in like the finals of something, and it was like at like a it was at a chess tournament, but it was like I think it was younger kids, and the kids that are watching in the crowd like start to spot the win like 5 turns out before the people like before the players actually play it out, because they're like double checking and triple checking to make sure that they
Yeah.
have the win, but the kids in the crowd are like wait, and then they like start going crazy before like any moves are made, and then they finish it out and it's over. It's like that type of thing is like you literally can't have that in Magic. To
No.
that to you can't have it to be 100% predicted, because theoretically there's always something off the top of the deck that could happen that could change everything.
Yeah.
You can't there's
Absolutely.
It's not perfect information. So that sort of like phenomena is there's a lot of weird phenomena that come when you go to the extreme of anything. So
Yeah.
um okay, I was definitely wasn't expecting to go into a sidetrack on chess, but I'm glad that we did. Now, do you like in your I guess life right now, do you have aspirations of being like a full-time pro, either sponsored or on a tournament scene or something like that, or is it just not something that would be appealing to you?
Sure. Um, yeah, I don't do it for the money necessarily. Like I said, I do it for the competition.
Hmm.
That is the high I chase, not the prize money. The prize money to me is a secondary thing that
Right.
buys me into more competition.
Right. So I get that as well, because I think we are very much on the same wavelength with a lot of that, but at the same time it's the prize money isn't important in the sense that like I don't care if I win $100,000. I'm not playing in a tournament more because it's
Yeah.
$100,000. Other than the sense that like this $100,000 allows me to play all the
Yep.
time. So in something like Magic, you literally cannot play unless you are like one of the like top 1%, probably even fewer than that, 1% of players in the world. You can't play at that level because it the money the economics of it don't make sense,
No.
because you can't travel 100,000 miles a year playing tournaments and
Mhm.
making like $100 a tournament every week. Like, the
Yeah.
economics don't make sense. So
Yeah.
what would for like Artifact, or even I guess in well, we can just talk about Artifact, but like what would a scene need to look like for like players to be able to play at that like full-time level? Like you kind of see
Mm.
some Hearthstone, like there's some Hearthstone players that can do it. Like there are definitely pro Hearthstone players, and then there's also streamers. But like Magic, it like I don't. There's like very few like actual just like 100% full time. Like they have no other job than
Yeah.
to be a player.
Yeah. So if we're looking at like we need Hearthstone artifact players that can play full time and like effectively not have a secondary job.
Right.
Um, in that case, prize money is going to matter more.
Hmm.
It would have to pay out deeper, but still pay out relevant amounts. Like
Hmm.
you can't have a deep payout where it's like you got $50 when your tournament
Right.
entry was probably that. Like, if it was a couple $100, but it was like a deeper payout, that does matter,
Hmm.
particularly for people who played locally or domestically.
Hmm.
Um, it would likely need a system like the Pro Players Club or like
Mhm.
Hearthstone's Master System, but I'm one reasonable to like obtain and continue to maintain and not basically be a very, a couple bad tournaments away from falling off a train
Mhm.
and just losing, thousands and thousands of dollars
Mhm.
because you hit bad variants and, lo and behold, that happens in a card game.
Mhm.
It would have to be something where we're rewarding consistent players, but we're rewarding them adequately, even if it's not necessarily like a cash value. If we're rewarding them with like accommodations or with
Mhm.
travel, that all adds up, and that
Mhm.
makes the grind much easier,
Mhm.
and people want to do it more.
Right.
So I think they'd have to look at something. If they wanted people to do it full time, they'd have to look at something like a Pro Players Club, but
Mhm.
make it something that made sense to grind towards. Like, it
Mhm.
doesn't make sense to grind towards something and play it, the game more than 40 hours a week when your reward is here's $1,000 every season or something like that.
Right.
It's like that doesn't make sense for most players, especially international players,
Right.
because I'm going to make the assumption that if Artifact has like LAN events,
Mhm.
I'm gonna make the assumption that maybe not the vast majority, but the majority are going to be in North America.
Mhm.
And for European players, Asian players, Australian, whatever, that's an expensive flight.
Yeah.
And if they're not on a sponsored team, these guys aren't paying out of pocket for it. So they'd have to find some way to mitigate that, unless they're like, well, this is going to be the game that America wins at. So
Yeah, I'm guessing that's probably not going to be the case. There's a huge, uh, I guess non-NA scene in Dota, and I mean Counter Strike as well,
yeah,
which are both Valve. So
yeah, Counter Strike more.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap us up here. Is there anything else, any other, I guess, comments or topics about Artifact that you wanted to mention or talk about that I didn't ask about?
No, it's just like kind of a fascinating game. It's just one that I'm interested in learning more about. Eventually playing, I do have a valid beta key, so
Nice.
get to be playing that, in
Getting
the
the band, we're
next
getting the band back
coming
together.
weeks. Yeah, I don't. I don't know what week in October it comes out. I'm probably gonna play some paintball. That's another
Yeah, we
weird
don't
thing that
we
I do
don't
for fun.
we don't know yet when it's coming out. They just said the blanket of October, so
Perfect. I love when it comes. That's a pet peeve of mine as well. Communication with companies and the
mhm.
player base. That is forever a thorn in my side in I think every single game I've played. Seriously.
Yeah. It's the old esports mantra of an announcement is just the
Oh my god,
most
it's
annoying thing
true.
ever. But what I will say is that I'm super glad that Valve is actually doing some like official card reveals with not just their own page, but they're reaching out to content creators and giving people card reveals, kind of like Magic the Gathering. So,
Yeah,
which
these
is
are good things.
yeah, which is way more than they ever do for any of the other games. But
Yeah.
all right, G, thank you so much for your time. The floor is yours. Any shout outs or throwouts you want to give, you can do that.
Hmm. Actually thought about this. I kind of lone wolf a lot of things. Like Hearthstone, I basically just like have a couple people that I play with that
Hmm.
travel with me, like hot girls and whatnot. Magic, kind of the same thing. I basically just play with the Dark Forest crew.
Hmm.
Oh, there is something to be said about shouting out Alex Bianchi and anything related to Buffalo. I knew I was going
Absolutely.
to weave that in there somewhere.
Someday when we are playing in the finals of the $1 million artifact tournament, we will both stop in. I don't know how they're going to do it, but let's just plan this out now. We're in the finals here, and if it's best 2 out of 3, we just do it like right in the middle of the second game. Whether it's right in the middle of the second game, we just both we like look over at each other, give the nod, stand up, look directly in the camera, and just say shout outs to Alex Bianchi, and then sit back down as if nothing happened and just keep playing.
That by the way was 100% happening if I did actually in Dreamhack Montreal. There was no way that was not happening in the post tournament interview. That I had well planned that ahead. I don't know why, because I didn't know what the rest of my like remarks would have been or my interview. I just knew that was in there.
I'm just so upset that when he actually won Grand Prix Pittsburgh that he didn't do that for himself. That was just the most disappointing.
Not enough showboating in his match.
Yeah, the classic bonehead Bianchi blunder just got there even when he won the tournament.
Alex has got to be one of my all-time favorite Magic players I've ever met, mostly
Absolutely.
because of exactly what you said on his playstyle. Alex plays at such a high level so consistently, but when he does it and the wheels fall off for a very brief moment, it's like Rembrandt.
He is the worst best player that I know.
Like, oh, there was a game I played when we were testing where he thought a Mem Knight that I had was an Etch champion, and I was just attacking him with a 1/1 and nothing else, and he had like 12 mana and like colonnades and snapcast mage. He just kept taking 1 until I got him to 4. And Radajack's just looking at him. He's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "It has protection from all colors." And I just like threw galvanic blasts at him when he got him to 4.
That is the most Bianchi play I've ever heard.
Just play very confidently against him, but he that's like rare. But it's just when it happens.
Oh yeah,
you remember every one of them.
Let's just preface this with, or amend this with, Alex is one of the best players in the, like literally. I think he's bronze now, but I think he got up to silver at one point. He's played silver, on many Pro Tours and won. Yep. Literally won Grand Prix Pittsburgh. So we say all this in jest. It's not,
absolutely. Alex is on like the short list of people in Western New York who are like overall better Magic player than me. Like there was probably a brief period where like I could make the argument that I might have been like on the same level, but overall like better. He's just more well-rounded than I am. I think he's just a super well-rounded player. I was more of a specialist.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, we could certainly be talking all night about the woes and pros of Buffalo Magic, but that podcast is sadly defunct. Shout out to the Slam Dunkers podcast, the greatest podcast of all time.
I am aware of that one.
The greatest podcast that ever happened. The greatest thing I've ever done is that podcast, and maybe we'll do a reunion episode sometime. I'm trying to get Joe Shea into Artifact, but
I hope so.
Because he's a big Dota player. He's a Dota player, so it makes all the sense in the world. Oh yeah. But okay. G, thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to start playing Artifact with you. Get the playtest group back together, and hopefully it pans out for everyone. And if not, I wish you the best of luck in all of the future Hearthstone tournaments you're playing in.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm looking forward to Artifact. I got a few Hearthstone majors, but I'll probably be playing Artifact all at the same time.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for listening. That, of course, was G, recent Dreamhack Montreal top 8 player. If you have any questions or anything, is there a place that people can find you? Or I know you're kind of a recluse online, but is there anything, Twitter or anything that you want people to hit up?
No, I've actually been too busy this week. I actually was gonna make a Twitter because I'm like, I'm an idiot. Why don't I have one of these yet? No, I always answer like whatever questions, but yeah, unfortunately, the routes to actually get to me are like kind of weird, but I mean, I'd answer any questions really. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a Twitter yet.
If you have any questions for G, you can shoot them to me at _Blevins on Twitter, and I will make sure that he gets them, and maybe we'll have a follow-up episode in the future. But again, thanks again, G. For G, I'm the Blevins, and we will see you guys later.